Let's put ourselves into the scene. We see Mary, and she's kneeling at Jesus' feet, and we're not sure where to look. Women do not touch men in this culture, and they certainly don't touch a man's foot, because everyone knows a foot might as well just be what we would politely call an upper inner thigh. This is a disgraceful performance. And now she's picking up the bottle of perfume and she's pouring it over his feet. It's unbelievable. A terrible waste. Making erotic gestures in front of everyone is one thing, but squandering this huge sum of money is quite another. In one tip of her hand, Mary has poured $50,000 all over the floor. And now she's wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. She seems to have no shame about this disgrace and no worries whatsoever about the criminal waste of money. And Judas is indignant and says, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 silver pieces and the money given to the poor?" Now Judas may appear to be playing fair, but in reality, he wants the money for himself. But whatever his motives, we miss the force of the story unless we recognize that Judas has a very important point. Judas is offering us the voice of common sense and of public order. We don't waste precious money and resources. And it's improper to step that close to the boundaries of relationships between the sexes. We're not to bypass those carefully thought out systems for providing welfare benefits for the truly poor. And who are we to disagree with Judas? I mean, he has all that vocabulary that makes our lives function, like policies and procedures and stewardship, bylaws and strategic plans. But despite all that, he can't see the one thing that's staring him in the face. He can't see what Mary can see, that Jesus is going to die in a week's time. Now, of course, we know that Judas is going to have a big hand in Jesus' entrapment and why he might be unprepared to see this. Have you ever been trying to get someone's attention? You start by maybe tapping them softly on the shoulder or calling out their name. But they can't hear you, and so you're forced to raise your voice or maybe even wave your arms in the air to get their attention, but still nothing. And so you're forced to go that step further and you have to stand on a chair and scream at the top of your lungs. This is pretty much what Mary is doing. Mary is standing on a chair and waving at the top of her lungs to get everybody's attention in the room. But when she does this, no one pays the slightest bit of attention. In fact, all that happens for Mary is that Judas points out that she's totally out of order. She makes this gesture that nobody listens to except for Judas. But Jesus is listening, and he tells Judas to leave Mary alone because he can see what it is she's trying to do. Jesus can see that Mary's act mirrors his own. Mary is behaving exactly like Jesus. She is a reflection of his actions, of his sacrifice. You see, Mary is demonstrating the extravagance of human love. And in doing this, she pours out her whole self. She pours out herself financially and socially and emotionally to gain everyone's attention in that room by this gesture of sheer beauty. Now, Jesus also demonstrates the extravagance of divine love. He too pours out his whole self physically and spiritually and emotionally. And he does this to gain people's attention because he is the extravagance of God. And if people take no notice of Mary, then how much worse that they can't see what Jesus is about to sacrifice for them. Because you see, Jesus is God, flinging off all his clothes and doing that wild and crazy thing to get us to see what really matters. And Jesus is God kicking and screaming to try and stir our attention away from those trivial things in our lives, those distractions that take us further away from our relationship with God. It leaves us with two very uncomfortable but necessary questions. And we can call those the Judas question and the Mary question. First, the Judas question. What is that thing that you are not willing or not able to see? What is God trying to show you? What is someone close to you saying to you? And then the Mary question. What is that beautiful thing that you are being called to do? I wonder if there's something you're drawn to but shy away from because it seems too costly or too extravagant or too ridiculous. Is there a wild gesture that you need to make? Because like Mary's gesture, it's time for you to imitate the extravagance of God. There are material extravagances in this life. Things like building kitchens with Swarovski-crusted $50,000 hood ranges, in kitchens that have other kitchens with private chefs. And they're spending that $500,000 on a 16th birthday party. But these are extravagances that few can or should afford. Today's scripture is not telling us to stop being extravagant, but telling us to be extravagant with things like our love and our time, and who we can afford to be extravagant with, our family and friends. To reach out with everything that we have and be extravagant to things like our commitment to social justice and taking care of God's creation. And we can be extravagant in following our dreams and setting goals for ourselves at any age. These are things we can afford to be extravagant with. We can afford to be extravagant in our faith in Jesus Christ. We should be reflecting on the Judas question. What's the thing I'm desperately trying with all my busyness not to see? Or maybe the Mary question. What is the beautiful thing that I'm being called to do, embarrassing or extravagant or crazy as it may be? What are we being called to pour out? I wonder, do you have passion like that? Do you have passion like God does for us? Because we are God's passion. We are God's extravagance, and we should never regret our extravagances with our time and our love, because God never regrets us. We are God's gorgeous, expensive, fragrant, crazy extravagance. One that God never regrets pouring out and wasting. Because we are God's perfect waste.